remember. I thought we ended right around the pancreas. Am I correct? Yes, no, maybe so. We're going to start there anyway.
Yeah, I think we were at, we
Yeah,
were talking about how you had an anecdote about someone who had like pancreatic surgery and
right. Yeah,
pancreatitis.
that was my ex, who I saw yesterday, by the way. Sorry, maybe if you're lucky, I'll have pictures Wednesday of the baby shower.
Does your wife know that you saw your ex?
We were together. She, we're friends. Unfortunately, my ex right now is either in a wheelchair or a walker. She has very big physical challenges, very difficult. So it's hard for me to see her like that. It really is. Not that you would know that, but I'm just saying. So she and my wife are. God bless my wife. Try to make friends with her because she really needs some friends. For that. Never. Okay, the pancreas, retroperitoneal. Again, important structures, ladies, are tacked down. Okay, so it's very small. I mean, it's a little bit of tissue, very unimpressive. And the pancreas, the duodenum, which is only about 10 inches long, encircles it. So I drew it like, imagine if that's 10 inches, as we are talking about in the other class, the AP class. There's not a lot to it. Maybe that's 6 or 8 inches long. Double duty gland, we're concerned about the exocrine function. We covered the endocrine function, and there's considerably more exocrine tissue, glandular tissue of that type, than endocrine glands like the beta cells and the beta Langerhans and the alpha Langerhans cells for glucagon and insulin. So, and mostly what they secrete, water, bicarb, to basically neutralize the acidity of the stomach of the chyme that's filled with acid, and dilute it because it's hyper concentrated. And to play its vital role, and the rest of it are, we call them zymogens. That's our precursor enzymes, because it would, just like we were talking about Joey, we're talking, it would die like it did to my ex when she had that surgery and removed the tumor from behind her pancreas. You start to spit out these enzymes, and they're indiscriminate. Any structure made of protein, your whole body's made of proteins, start to auto digest the cavity. It was horrible. So so it's just tons and tons of these glandular cells, which are probably simple cuboidal or modifications of that. And they're very busy. These are all protein-based substances, with the exception of the bicarb, and the water comes from other structures that are there. So the ductal cells, as you can see, secrete the bicarbonate and the water. But here, all those zymogen granules come from, these are called the CNR cells. The CNR is code for the kind of glandular shape, which is more circular than tubular. You have a CNRs and you have tubular. You don't have to know that. As you can see, we make 1.5 liters a day. Very alcohol. Everything is pH controlled. Electrolytes, primarily bicarb, all those enzymes. Once we get into the small intestine, that's all about chemical digestion and absorption. If by the time you're halfway through the small intestine, halfway through the jejunum, so the duodenum's 10 inches, the jejunum's about 8 feet. By the time you're through with that, pretty much everything has been chemically digested and absorbed. The vast majority. So we have a lot of extra. Helpful for me, particularly. Protease, so any proteins. Now we go back and we start. Now we started this in the stomach. We're continuing it. Amylase, we started this in the mouth. Haven't touched starches, carbohydrates. Lipases, we've addressed in the mouth and in the stomach. And the first time we're addressing nucleases. You see the illustrations that are there. So of course they're inactive in the plasma membrane of the duodenal epithelial cells. There is this enzyme. These are called brush border enzymes. Brush border enzymes are what break things down to amino acids so we can absorb them, take disaccharides into monosaccharides, break apart the components of nucleic acid, of nucleotides, etc., etc. So that's where those enzymes of that brush, you remember every villi is surrounded by cells, simple columnar cells, and for a surface area, it's all microvilli. All those microvilli, those teeny tiny fingers, are filled with these enzymes. One of this is enteropeptidase. What that does is it activates the precursor protein trypsinogen to trypsin, and then trypsin sets off a chain reaction, making more trypsinogen, okay, activating rather more trypsinogen, activating carboxypeptidase, chymotrypsinogen to chymotrypsin. So it's a chain reaction of proteolytic enzymes. Very busy area. All of this is occurring along that massive amount of surface area, despite the relatively limited appearance of a tube, 25 feet long or so. That's maybe an inch, inch and a half in overall diameter. But all those wonderfully covered, the fact that they go in circles and the food kind of goes down spiral fashion, all those wonderful little nub villi and microvilli. It's just a brilliant piece of putting a tremendous amount of surface area into a very small package, so to speak. Here you can see it. And the single most important area, I say it again and again, is this: the common bile duct, now known as the hepatopancreatic sphincter. For us, it'll be common bile duct. Oh, for somebody who loves me, my daughter. Because we, 150-pound box I managed to get to her house on Saturday and unload by myself.
Those days at the gym.
Yeah, hey, yesterday, yeah, baby. Saturday night, yeah. So, get that machine, 20 pounds. The one that you guys, have 100 on. Working out, baby. So here's the membrane-bound enteropeptidase. Here's this sort of chain reaction. You don't have to know it, just be familiar with how it works in general. That's the way it is. Here we have the hepatopancreatic ampulla, formerly the common bile duct. Interesting shape. It has a sphincter that controls the entry. There's even an accessory duct that provides additional material. What I was saying to you before is that really STF you Fermi Labouche Sheket Pravakasha. That's Hebrew. Little Hebrew never heard. Most people have one word, shalom. Peace, hello, goodbye, great word. Any words they might have heard in Fiddler on the Roof. That was a musical. Hey. Moving on. So, as we continue with this is the area that they had to check on me so I could have that second surgery and be around here to teach you, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be here so then. So here you can see it again, the controls that are there. So you're getting again, the gallbladder is effectively an overflow tank. So you're collecting the bile, is collecting, concentrating there, non-essential, feeding in along with the pancreatic duct. So we get all of this together. That's basically it from an anatomical and physiological standpoint. So the big controls, again, as food enters the duodenum, it immediately, the stretch receptors, as osmolar receptors, the pH receptors immediately trigger the release of these two enzymes, cholecystokinin and secretin, and they have multiple tasks. Secretin is probably the primary stimulus to the pancreas. Secretin basically is also indicating to the stomach to slow down, because you don't want to be overwhelmed with squirts of chyme coming in. So basically, once it starts to enter, typically it's about 4 to 6 hours for your stomach to empty, but it starts emptying somewhere between 20 to 40 minutes, depending on what you've ingested. 20 would be early, 40 would be about average. And once that starts, it's the system's monitoring itself. So it's basically these hormones, the cholecystokinin, same way. Yes, its primary activity is to basically to effectively squeeze that overflow tank, metaphorically speaking, to release bile or trigger the liver to do the same thing, but also reinforce the activity of the pancreas, increase motility of the small intestine, and basically tell the stomach, all right, starting to unload. Don't do too much because that super acidic stuff is a big problem. I like it when the organs talk to it. To me, that makes sense to me. This sort of, this chemical conversation we have internally on how the human body works. I love it. I mean, that's why it's so easy to, pardon the expression, mess up. Say something else. So easy. It's miraculous to me how it works. I know it's preachy about it, but it's just every time I teach these classes, I get a little more understanding and a little more awed by how it is when it works right. You're very fortunate. I got a shot for my grandson yesterday. He's Mr. Cute, soon to be 5, walking around going to everybody. Grandpa, how old are you? I said, I'm going to be 74, May 10th. He goes, you look 80. Get a shot from the kid. What? He told me about it. But he's so cute, you can't resist him. Oh my gosh. See what I have to put up with? That very granddaughter, now 23. I think I told you. I had an apartment before when courses were being finalized, and I'd watch her some weekends. And she's a little girl, like 9 or 10, now 23. So you figure out the time, like 2011, 2010. And I said, are you going to shower before we drop you off at your mom? She goes, yeah. She goes, but I forgot my brush. I said, oh, you can use mine. She goes, why do you need a hairbrush? We have a family whose sole mission is to give me a hard time. Don't have children. So they're just showing you all the stuff that they do, and you can read through this. I can't, it's too small, and we're done. Okay, almost done with the heavy duty stuff here. Moving on. So as we close the door on that, we open the door on this. Part C, the small intestine. We did the anatomy. Review it. All the different things. We all did this in advanced anatomy. Everybody was here. Most of us were here. You can read this. It's straightforward. Okay. The whole idea, you have all of these adaptations. And so they underestimated here. It's not 7 to 13 feet. It's probably closer to 20 to 22 feet in general. Inch to an inch and a half in diameter. And so this is 10 inches. If this is 8 and 12, that's 20 where I come from. Call it funny. They're all identical. Once you get past the common bile duct, anatomically, it all has the same thing. So here in purple is the duodenum. Here's the jejunum. It's like they took this piece and basically cut out this part of my stomach, more or less. So they cut out a lot of this part of the stomach that was here and basically cut an opening and pulled this up to there, cut a slit here, and it's called an end to side anastomosis. We won't necessarily go there. And so that was a lot on 2 occasions. And then the rest is jejunum, and you'll see that the jejunum ends very famously at the cecum, the first part of the large bowel, the first section or segment. It's called a haustrum, Haustrum, but it has a name called the cecum, and this therefore is the ileocecal valve. And the same thing applies. Once stuff starts moving into here, it's basically a signal to the rest of the system. Okay, we're going to have to get ready to move stuff to basically eliminate this. So it starts to be in preparation of a bowel movement. So this is kind of all of this is tied together. Interestingly, you saw this before ad nauseum. The blood supply, we're not worried about. That's anatomy. Again, parasympathetic, sympathetics play a role. These are the surface areas, just to remind you, size of a tennis court. Plica circularis, between circular folds, spinning the food rather than just shooting through. Maximum contact. Everywhere, the little nubs we call villi, and on top of every one of these little 1 millimeter nubs, we have all of them are covered in simple columnar cells with microvilli, surface area, surface area, surface area. So 1 centimeter deep folds, so they're like little, you see the illustration, doesn't better than me trying to draw it. The villi themselves, in the villi, and this is the functionality, there is a capillary bed in this finger. In the middle of it is a lacteal. That's a lymphatic structure for heavy fat-laden particles and some proteins that would not fit nicely into the bloodstream, so to speak. And then you have a capillary bed that's around it with basically an arterial capillaries and a venial. That's the consistent finding of the villi. The microvilli, brush border, and you just saw an example of brush border enzymes, principally for carbohydrate and protein digestion. The nucleases and the lipases are basically broken down fats sufficiently for us to absorb them. But that's what that lacteal, that lymphatic structure is for. Here you can see how the surface, you can imagine the surface area. If you did this for 30 feet, we'd get bored. Go around in circles, spirals. Here you can see the lacteal. You can hear all we call them enterocytes. These are by far and away the most rapidly reproductive cells in the adult. More so than the stomach, more so than the small intestine, the large intestine rather, it's here. Rather than having glands, they have crypts, CRYPTS, as you can see. Fancy name there, you might, yes, sir.
And the most fast dividing, why we hear more about like colon cancers than small intestine?
Because there's more cancers in the colon. Okay, they divide fairly rapidly in the colon, but think what's in the colon. You tend to get fecal material, and there tend to be weaknesses because that's solid, and it begins to create, it starts with things called polyps. And those polyps, unless you're careful with diet, making sure that there's enough roughage, stool softeners, all that type of stuff, as people get older, they start around age 40, they start looking at that. Which is a good question, it's a fair question. Where we don't see it in the small intestine. The small intestine, effectively, what's being eliminated is still mostly in its liquid phase. The colon absorbs the water, some electrolytes, some vitamins have a deal in there. Non-essential tissue, by the way. You can do without it. But the trouble is it gets harder, and as we get older, the wall weakens of the colon from the contractions, and that paves the way for these polyps. And also for diverticulum, these out pouches like bubbles in the tire that fill with feces. So that's where we see, that's the colon. So I had that recently. You might recall in September, I had to take the day off because I had to have a double header, colonoscopy and an endoscopy. The endoscopy is where I'd have my surgery, so I they had me come back in January just to make sure that the little polyp that they saw there was nothing more than normal post-op, no problem. And the colonoscopy was clear. So I was, at soon to be 74, pretty happy about it. It's that great diet of mine. Burgers and fries and pizza.
You have lettuce on the burger though, right?
You're looking at Salad Central soon. We have indulged since the wedding for 2 months. Oh my God. The food was great. My daughter had this catered. And oh my God, it was great. All we did was eat. We've done a lot of this. All we do is eat. Not good. Those Girl Scout cookies. Went down to my kids. We ordered 10, but my first year, my granddaughter was selling them. Any respectable grandparent's going to order a bunch of gum. So, we could bring them in here for you to eat them, but no. I wouldn't want to. I think that's poor nutrition. I'd rather. Here it is. Here's the lacteal personal. Microscopically. Those are all those mucus bands, and these are the micro. It's a great illustration of microvilli. Everything in here, other than the mucus granules, are filled with brush border enzymes all along this area. So the intestinal crypts, okay, when you hear about somebody on cancer chemotherapy, what are the first cells to go? Most common problems: diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, number one hit break. These here, the intestinal crypts, which are you might read about called crypts of Leberkuhn, was a formal name. Not that you have to know that. These are where the damage from cancer chemotherapy hits the hardest and the fastest. These enterocytes are there, simple columnar. Tight junctions are important. Again, stuff that you don't want stuff to absorb unless by design sideways. You want, even if it's just transcytosis through the cell. Sometimes it has to be processed by the enterocyte. A lot of times the enterocyte is just where it passes from the lumen of the bowel into the circulation, as it were. So the crypts, more intestinal juice, watery mixture of mucus that is really a carrier fluid, good way to express it. Goblet cells, the enteroendocrine cells are in that as well. Same thing that we saw before. Enterogastrones, that's where it stretches, just like gastrin in the stomach, we have cholecystokinin and secretin found scattered in the villi, but also in the crypts. Pannus cells, those are defensive cells. Okay, defensins and lysozymes that are there. You go back in the diagrammatically, we're looking at some of the mucosis-associated lymphoid tissue. The Pannus cells you can see pointing toward way down in this area. So there's different ones that secrete agents because you're really coming in contact. This is sort of the final opportunity to detoxify, if it will, to deactivate, if you will. So, and there's always a lot of lymphatic tissue that's associated with it. So stem cells that continuously divide every 2 to 4 days. So that's why, and Dr. Buxton and I were teaching to the nuclear science major. They changed the major, but he and I, because they were without an instructor for about 3 years, we did decide first on site and then as a online class, teaching what's called radiation biology. And so he took care of the radiation aspect, and I took care of the biology, the cellular aspect, what went wrong, etc. He's talking about more of the radiation science, the rads and Roentgens and Rens, whatever they, grays. We have above my head. Lots of this. Peyer's patches or aggregated nodules that are there. Great numbers. Farther you go along the small intestine, more bacteria. And eventually, those bacteria are making their way into the large intestine. And they play an important role that are there. Large plasma cells and IgA, all of these things. Alkaline mucus, so neutralizing the chyme. This is the chemotherapy nugget. Rapidly dividing cells, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. I mean, I remember a patient clearly, they were going to do, I forget what they gave him the chemo for. I think it was prostate or colon cancer. And he said basically, his instructions were to get basically they were telling him, be ready for the diarrhea. Here's things you need to have at home. About this. Witch hazel wipes, because it was very soothing. Well, if you've never experienced this stuff, it's really bad. People are prone. People look like, well, it's not cancer. You think of people with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. It's awful. I told you about that first girlfriend of mine with ulcerative colitis. Yes. In high school, she had such bowel problems, constipation, diarrhea. Never, we just thought, different things. After we broke up, I hadn't heard from her a long time, and then whatever reason, I mean, she must have Googled my name when I was teaching her Chatham. So last contact 25 years later, I get an email, and I talked to her on the phone. It's very interesting because she had her colon removed. They found out she had ulcerative colitis, awful diagnosis, tons and tons of surgeries. She had a very difficult life. Bad marriage, all that stuff. It's so sad as you get older and you hear people, even if you've known and you really don't have a relationship with, you don't have to hear people have problems. So here's the juices, 1 to 2 liters. That's a lot. Okay. Okay, major stimulants, the acid and the hypertonicity of the chyme. Okay, and again, the juices are alkaline and isotonic with blood plasma. So water, mucus, etc. Chyme, partially digested carbs, fats, proteins, 3 to 6 hours. So now that journey before it gets into the large intestine, are we looking 6 to 10 hours, maybe a ballpark? Different things take longer. If you're having that big salad and broccoli and it's going to take longer to get through. Those kind of vegetables take long. I mean, if you're eating something that's strictly a piece of pizza with a minimal amount of cheese on it, whoosh, going through it. Pepperoni won't make a difference. So bile, bicarbonate, digestive enzymes that aren't even brush border enzymes from the liver and pancreas. Everything else is these brush border enzymes. And you'll see they describe it to you a little bit here. So I want to give you a general understanding. So it's hypertonic when it enters, slow to prevent, it's going to pull water away, acidic, mixed with the bile and pancreatic juice. Yeah, the reflexes that are produced, the secretin and cholecystokinin. And this is in the small intestine, it's all about what takes time is that back and forth segmentation. So much different. Okay, mostly peristalsis previously. Stomach is mostly peristalsis. There's a lot of over and back from those oblique muscles, but other than that, here there's a lot of segmentation and a variety of reflexes. Again, parasympathetic more, sympathetic less. Okay, as you can see, as it gets farther down, there's something called motilin that plays a role. They describe these migrating motor complexes. And so effectively, as it's getting farther along, it's getting a little more intense as things are being made to make the next trip into the large intestine. Once you get in the large intestine, again, it's just moving along, peristalsis, segmentation, mostly absorbing the right amount of water, either retaining water or absorbing it to get the feces into the right consistency. Get maybe a little bit of vitamin K related production. Okay, that'll be clotting factors, which are important, not essential, because they are made elsewhere as well. Some B vitamin production, some electrolyte absorption, not a whole lot. And the complete trip from duodenum to the ileum, on average, about 2 hours. But longer and short when you talk about the whole meal. They're just showing you Paris. We saw this illustration before. And again, there's a reflex. It enhances the force of segmentation in the ileum. So effectively, it's once it starts to go, relaxes and chyme into the large intestine, enhances the force of segmentation of the ileum. So it's moving things along, more motility, etc., etc. And again, there's a flap, so to speak, there that prevents it from regurgitating. And then everything else here, there's nothing. This is anatomy, things that made a large intestine. We did all this. We're not doing it. Anything like that. Nothing really to say about that. You remember the anatomy diagrams. The appendix, which is used to reseed this area after a bout of diarrhea, food poisoning. And we've all experienced it, I would wager. And then, up, ascending with the flexure, transverse, tack down here and here at the flexures, tack down here in that anorectal area. And by this time now, once you go from sigmoid colon to rectum, now you're back transitioning to simple squamous, stratified squamous non-keratinizing. Out we go. Appendicitis, you can read through that. Again, not a whole lot. Thicker mucosa, microscopically speaking, doesn't have the circular folds or villi. So it has mucus and goblet cells. And as it gets to the anus, these columns are sort of, think of it almost like as compacting things to ease the passage through, to facilitate the passage through. And there's a little bit more anatomy. That's part, I don't get excited about this, about these insensitive to pain or sensitive to pain. And I know if you have hemorrhoids, they're not pleasant. This is the whole idea. Think of that. thousands of different types of bacteria that outnumber, if you take all the bacteria that's in your alimentary canal, principally in the colon, 10 to 1. So if you have billions of cells, you're talking about tens or hundreds of billions of bacteria. It's immense. And they play such an important role. They break down indigestible things. Some of the carbs, we're talking about cellulose, some of the mucin, that's carbohydrate. Yes, there's a certain amount of gas that's produced. It depends. Some, realistically, some more than others, some associated with diet. You probably, you've probably many times experienced yourself, oh boy, I ate that. Oh boy, did I pay the price for eating that? I look forward to it. I mean, I want to go wild sometimes. Look, I shouldn't sit there and, fell in love with that pork al pastor we had. And of course, the margaritas helped a little. But it's like, it's got guajillo chilies, and I made it. It's got guajillos, and it's got chipotles, and some other goodies, bunch of garlic. Oh, God. Note seeds. Oh, that beautiful red color. Oh, I can't. Oh, melt in your mouth. But again, vitamin B complex and some vitamin K plays a role. You, again, not essential. You can get those easily enough. Keeps the bad guys. C. diff would be an example of one of those. And we take broad spectrum antibiotics, etc. A lot of sampling that goes on. This mucosa associated IgA, etc. There's all of that. A lot of implications of gut bacteria. All that you can read through it, etc. Residue in the large intestine. So if you wonder how long it takes from putting it in to getting it out, there's no hard and steady rule. X number of hours. It depends. Some things are going to make it move faster or slower. I don't have a clock to be able to tell you. Okay. There's nothing to do. You're not doing any digestion, minimal absorption. Some vitamins, some water, some electrolytes. That's about it. But basically, a big deal is just moving it along and getting rid of it. So again, important for our comfort, not essential. So, and this is what you can exteriorize these, or with this gal, I know she had something called a J pouch. They pulled it down and created a little pouch and anastomosed it, tied it into her anal rectal area. Just, I mean, I can only imagine. So other things, the contractions of the haustrum, those individual segments, other reflexes, presence of food in the stomach. Like I said, when we eat something, basically it sends a message down to the ileum and go, listen, okay? And then it sends it, move stuff into the colon. It sends stuff to the colon and said, it would be a good time. You and I all know that every so often you eat something and go, boy, I feel like I gotta go now. Without getting, onto, this is what you were talking about before. Depending on what a lot of people, you're eating a lot of simple carbs and fats and a ton of protein, and you're not eating all those salads. You're not eating stuff that has a lot of fiber. You need it. And what happens is the contractions, walls break down, and some of the lining penetrates out, effectively herniates like a bubble to tire. That's a diverticulum. And they can trap fecal material in there. Half the people over 70. So do I have some? Probably. I mean, I remember asking, and he said, yeah, you sure you have, but nothing to worry about. My favorite. When do we look at it again? 4 or 5 more years. I'll be 80. How will Dr. Batcher let me get a day off for that? And this is what you hear about people with diverticulitis, because inflamed, something gets trapped. Yes, they can rupture. And if you have enough of them that are periodically severe, it's called diverticulosis. So itis means inflammation, osis means condition. So it can go from this to this, and it's not fun. Irritable bowel, a lot of people have this. what I call, to some extent, it's a little bit of a garbage diagnosis. A lot of times you go to somebody and you explain this and they'll say, oh, you probably have something like irritable bowel. Because it's a rather challenging evaluation or workup. And I think we don't appreciate that to really diagnose it. Gastroenterologist, if you go to your family doctor, and trust me, this is one of the things that I object to with medicine, particularly when it comes to a gal comes in who's young, your age group, stress, and my stomach hurts. This must be, it's like stress tension migraines. You have a stress tension side. They're very dismissive. And that's wrong. It's like you're not allowed to, you're premenstrual. Horrible. I don't like that. And that's, it's just, it doesn't have to be, it's not gender specific. Go to a doctor. Listen, there are a lot of doctors out there. Okay. They're all looking for patients, trust me. It's not like it's not $1 million profession anymore. You get rich from your investments and your financial, not from what you're doing, unless you're, if you're a famous Hollywood plastic surgeon who's really good, I'll buy that. But those are one in thousands. So if you don't like your doctor, here's what you do. Find another doctor. I am not shy about that stuff. Hello and goodbye. I'm not coming. Would you like to make an appointment? No, thank you. I'll let you know if I need you. You give them the old Kishmir and Tuchus. I don't want to explain to you. You're probably familiar with my statement about this. We're not talking about this. It's a bunch of shit. Aha. Chemical, okay. They've got to be small. This is the whole idea. So when it comes to it, think monomers. Okay. Everything is involved in the same thing, and it's all about hydrolysis. It's all about pH control. The whole 101 intro high school biology, hydrolysis, dehydration synthesis. We're on that. Just have the right enzymes, and we're working. Okay, moving substances from the lumen into it. The tight junctions mean they're either entering the cell through the apical membrane, the lumen side, exiting through the blood side, the basolateral membrane. Sometimes it's just transcytosis. It's all okay. Lipid molecules can be absorbed passively, but everything else active transport. So there's a lot of energy expenditure when we're at rest. Think of it that way. A lot of your blood supply, and we're going to get to renal after this. That's why there's so much blood supply. They are busy areas, much busier. So we have to transfer that energy when we're active, during fight or flight, or just going out for a workout. Otherwise, most nutrients are absorbed before chyme reaches the ileum. Like I said, about a third of the way through, half the way through tops that are there. And so here you can see, again, a lot of tight, because those secretions, whether it's acidic or whether it's alkaline, whether it's laden with active proteolytic enzymes, they're going to make mischief if they get through those tight junctions. So we don't want something to damage them. So the route of absorption is through here. Whether there's processing or not, that's a different issue entirely. Speaking of that, monosaccharides, that's lactose intolerant 101. Lactose is a disaccharide. It tends to irritate. It tends to bring along water with it. Some people, it hits them very, very quickly. I'm shocked. I think there's a lot of up here. But I mean, I have a stepson who, we made something, all of a sudden there's hidden dairy in there. And I mean, it didn't take long before he's unhappy with us. Okay? So, starch and disaccharides, salivary amylase, the rest of the amylase breaks it down, depending on what you've ingested, whether it's maltose, sucrose, or lactose. It's finally broken down with the presence of the appropriate enzyme. They go through all that. Pancreatic amylase takes it down to and eventually you're just breaking down the small change depending on what it was. And effectively then the brush border enzymes that you don't have to remember. And again, that's where the lactose intolerance, that's there. dextrose, lactase, glucoamylase, maltase, sucrase, anything that you might come into contact with. I leave it to the biochemistry professor to tell you about that, whoever that may be. So the monosaccharides are co-transported. And again, secondary active transport with sodium. We're using the same mechanism. You're going to see it again when we get to the urinary. Monosaccharides exit, facilitated diffusion. So they're all part of it. So this is not telling you anything you don't already have an idea what's going on. But here's the co-transportation, how we're expending the energy, etc. Fine. It gets in there. Fine. Lactose intolerance, don't have the lactase. Yes, you can deal with that by avoiding, or you can deal with that. Some people, not everybody, help by using like milk that's already has been pre-lactased. Used to put lactate. I don't know if that works or not. I don't. We used it with my kids because it was there, but my son, who at the time was lactose intolerant, is not now. It's interesting. Both of my boys had that, but my middle one had it the worst. But they both they all had to be on special formula. They all had to be on soy or even more special pre-digested formula. They all had stomach problems. Even as adults, they still do. But their stomachs are not horrible, sketchy.
Was it an allergy or was
But
it intolerance?
the allergies probably.
My mom had the same thing. Said hers was
Allergies. And so my son will go. They just put him. They're working on for a kidney stone. It was probably just a urinary tract infection. They gave him basically a strong cephalosporin. He goes, Dad, I took it in 2 hours. I'm dying. And I said, it's probably not allergic, but your stomach has always been like that. And when to start the treatment, they'd given him injections, no problem at all. So it's cunning. All of these things, undigested solutes, all this type of stuff that happens. If it works for you, if tablets work, fine. There's all types of other things. Protein, digestive enzymes and proteins from breakdown. So they eventually we are absorbing amino acids, period. Okay, become inactive in the alkaline pH. Digestion begins at the lower pH, becomes inactive with pepsin, and we rely on all these other guys without going crazy with the names. And we're not going to go over the names of the amino acids that are there, but effectively the brush border enzymes, carboxypeptidases, dipeptidases, aminopeptidases. Long story short, eventually take them down into the component amino acids, co-transported again by a secondary either sodium or hydrogen ion, transported, and they exit the same way. Same illustration. So we'll finish up with fats. My voice is getting tired. So I'll finish this up, get started on kidney. We're making good progress. Next week, we'll probably take care of renal and have the rest of the time for male and female reproduction. Great. Thanks a bunch. See you guys in a bit.